Last week, Reuters reported that the Biden administration released oil from the U.S. strategic oil reserves to foreign countries, including China. The news media on both sides is so biased that it is hard to understand what actually happened. I'm going to take a closer look at the facts in this video. Let me start with a disclaimer. I will be making some criticism of China in this video. I'm referring specifically to the government of China, the Communist Party of China, or the CCP. I have nothing but respect and love for the Chinese people. Please do not send any hate towards the Asian community. The point is to highlight the real issue in this story, which is the Communist Party of China. The reason this news story has hit a nerve with the American people is there's been a long-standing criticism of Biden that he is weak on China because of his past business relationships through his son, Hunter Biden. Here's a clip from the debate during the last election.
Ask the question. You're going to have 2 minutes to respond. For 2 elections in a row now, there has been substantial interference from foreign adversaries. What would you do in your next term to put an end to this? 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, let me respond to the first part as Joe answered. Joe got $3.5 million from Russia, and it came through Putin because he was very friendly with the former mayor of Moscow, and it was the mayor of Moscow's wife. And you got $3.5 million. Your family got $3.5 million, and you know, someday you're going to have to explain, why did you get 3.5? I never got any money from Russia. I don't get money from Russia.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. We learned that this president paid 50 times the tax in China, has a secret bank account with China, does business in China, and in fact is talking about me taking money. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever, ever. Number one. Number two, this is a president. I have released all of my tax returns. 22 years. Go look at them. 22 years of my tax return. You have not released a single solitary year of your tax return. What are you hiding?
I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do. I don't make money from Russia. You made $3.5 million, Joe, and your son gave you. They even have a statement that we have to give 10% to the big man. You're the big man, I think. I don't know, maybe you're not, but you're the big man, I think. Your son said we have to give 10% to the big man. Joe, what's that all about? It's terrible.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had, the only guy made money from China is this guy. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China.
President Trump, let me ask my question to you.
But could I just one thing?
Very quickly.
His son didn't have a job for a long time, was sadly no longer in the military service. I won't get into that. And he didn't have a job. As soon as he became vice president, Burisma, not the best reputation in the world. I hear they paid him $183,000 a month. Listen to this. 183, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment.
All right.
And he had no energy.
I'm going to let the Vice President respond to that quickly, and then I need to get
dishonest.
to a question to you. Very
No
quickly,
basis for that. Everybody investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong in Ukraine.
Okay. Vice President Biden, your response, please.
My response is, look, this isn't about, there's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey. There's a reason for it. He doesn't want to talk about the substantive issues. It's not about his family and my family. It's about your family. And your family's hurting badly. If you're making less than, if you're a middle-class family, you're getting hurt badly right now. You're sitting at the kitchen table this morning deciding, well, we can't get new tires, they're bald because we have to wait another month or so. Or are we going to be able to pay the mortgage? Or who's going to tell her she can't go back to community college? They're the decisions you're making in the middle-class families like I grew up in Scranton and Claymont. They're in trouble. We should be talking about your families, but that's the last thing he wants to talk about.
Now, if you don't like Trump, don't worry, because I'm going to criticize him in a little bit. But I want to focus first on the issue of China. The criticism is that Biden gets a lot of money from China, and so he's going to make policy decisions that are favorable to China at the expense of the American people. I think you have to look at this in the broader context. Biden is not the only person getting rich from China. a lot of very wealthy people act the same way. These are people like Mark Cuban and Ray Dalio. I'm going to take some time and show you what these people are saying about China. Here is Mark Cuban on Megyn Kelly's podcast talking about why the NBA continues to invest in China despite their human rights abuses. This is in contrast to the Women's Tennis Association, which pulled events out of China when tennis star Peng Shuai went missing.
So you tell me whether the NBA needs to get more vocal in condemning what we're now seeing there, which is an ethnic cleansing of a minority Muslim group known as the Uyghurs. 1 million or more are being held against their will right now, men, women, and children facing torture, forced labor, physical and sex abuse, coercive population control, forced abortion, forced sterilizations. And the question remains, why won't you and the NBA explicitly condemn that?
Right. When it comes to human rights, I'm against all human rights violations around the world. China
including the ones in China?
China is not the only country with human rights violations.
Right, but including the ones in China, you're against their human rights violations?
I'm against all human rights violations.
Including China, Mark?
Yes, including China. Any human rights violations anywhere are wrong.
Why would the NBA take $500 million plus from a country that is engaging in ethnic cleansing?
So basically you're saying that nobody should do business with China ever.
Why don't you just answer my question?
No, Megan, I'm just trying to get to the root of it. So
why would the NBA do that?
You are the one who said, they are a customer. They are a customer of ours. And guess what, Megan? I'm okay with doing business with China. You know, I wish I could solve all the world's problems, Megan. I'm sure you do too. But we can't. And so we have to pick our battles. And while you'd like to get proclamations so you can create a clip that says, look what I got Mark to say, you don't want to deal with the actual action item. You might think silence is violence, but action gets change.
Here is Ray Dalio on CNBC talking about why he continues to invest in China despite their human rights abuses.
One of the quick questions I just want to ask you on China, though, is clearly there's human rights issues. There's questions right now about this Chinese tennis player, Peng Shuai. There have been questions about Jack Ma. How do you think about that piece of it when it relates to investing there?
Well, I can't be an expert in those types of things. What I basically do, and for 50 years I invest all over the world, I look to whatever the rules are. If the government has a policy that I should do a certain thing and so on, but I can't be an expert.
There are things that happen in the United States that I don't agree with, that I imagine you don't agree with, but I think that those things are different than some of the things we see happening in China. People aren't, the government isn't disappearing people, for example.
Okay. Look, you want to get into the policy of disappearing people. I'll give a little bit of a perspective of that, okay? What they have is an autocratic system. And one of the leaders described it, he said, that the United States is a country of individuals and individualism. And that's what it's about. He said in China, it's an extension of the family. He said, if you look at the word country in China, it consists of two characters, state, family. And that has to do with Confucian. And it's very much a top-down. And as a top-down country, what they're doing is that it's that kind of like a strict parent. They behave like a strict parent. And they go through that. That is their approach. We have our approach. That's a question. The notion of whatever they're doing in terms of calling in people and then behaving in a certain way, that's their approach. If I picked that, evaluated all approaches around the world, in all countries, I'd be in a bind to try to find out, where do I invest and so on. It's just not my domain, and I'll leave it to the government to make those decisions. And that's my basic approach.
These are billionaires that publicly stick up for China. They are getting rich at the expense of the American people. Meanwhile, the Chinese people are struggling with human rights abuses from their own government. So what Biden is being accused of here is just doing the same thing that all of his billionaire friends are doing. They want Biden to act this way. They are being friendly to China while looking the other way on all of the bad things that are happening. Meanwhile, China is very public that they are not a friend of the United States. In fact, they are a very serious military and nuclear threat. So how did the U.S. send China the U.S. oil reserves? Let us look at the timeline. We all know that we have been suffering through high inflation and high gas prices. The Biden administration called on nations around the world to cooperate in cooling the oil markets. China did the opposite. In February, China ramped up purchases in its oil reserves, pulling oil off the market and causing prices to rise even higher. China started doing this immediately after Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing at the start of the Olympics. Take a look.
The opening ceremony of this year's Winter Olympics is underway in Beijing. This is the scene at the main stadium known as the Bird's Nest. The rim is decorated with the flags of the 91 competing nations and regions. The ceremony is due to last around 2 hours and it will culminate in the lighting of the Olympic cauldron. Few global leaders have gone to Beijing to be at the opening, but the Russian President Vladimir Putin is there. This morning he held a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, who gave his support to Russia's security and foreign policy aims. It comes at a time when many in the West fear President Putin is planning to invade Ukraine. China also gave its backing to the demand that NATO halt its expansion.
The timing of China's actions has caused speculation that it is part of a coordinated effort between Russia and China to cripple the United States. Gas prices continued to rise. The next month, on March 31st, Biden announced he was going to perform the largest release from the U.S. strategic oil reserves ever to counter rising gas prices. On April 21st, part of that release, totaling 950,000 barrels, was sold to Unipec, which is a company owned by the Chinese government. So the U.S. oil reserves have gone down, and China's oil reserves have gone up in the middle of an energy crisis. Reuters broke this news story last week on July 6th. Here we are, 11 days later, and the Biden administration has refused to make any statement about the sale.
And then there's a Reuters report out this morning that says that more than 5 million barrels of oil that were released from the emergency oil reserves were exported to Europe and Asia last month, and some of it reportedly was actually heading to China. Is the administration aware of those reports? And does the president mind that some of this oil that was meant to ease pain for consumers is headed overseas?
I have not seen that report, so I would honestly have to go look into it and see what the truth is in that statement that you just laid out, and see exactly what's happening. I just have not seen that report.
It is important to understand a little about the U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve. The U.S. has 4 large empty salt caves located in Texas and Louisiana. We use these caves like large bottles that we fill up with oil. If the U.S. ever needs the oil, they can easily pump it out of the salt caves. The U.S. started doing this in the 70s because of OPEC. Saudi Arabia and other Middle East countries who are a part of OPEC control a large amount of the world's oil supply. At the time, OPEC announced an oil embargo where they refused to sell oil to countries that supported Israel. The price of oil rose 300% and shocked the U.S. economy. The U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve started as a response to that threat. If a foreign nation tried to interrupt oil supplies, the U.S. would be able to release oil into the markets to relieve the price shocks. Whenever the U.S. releases oil from the U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve, it's a big deal. It does not happen very often. In fact, it has only happened 3 times before now. In 1991 for Operation Desert Storm, in 2005 for Hurricane Katrina, in 2011 for the civil war in Libya. What happened in Libya is the closest precedent to what is happening now. In case you forgot, Libya broke out into civil war in 2011 when rebel forces ousted Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi was captured and killed, but the fighting continued into 2012 when U.S. government buildings were attacked in Benghazi. Multiple Americans, including the United States Ambassador Christopher Stevens, were killed. Obama considered the aftermath of the civil war in Libya as his greatest mistake as president.
As his 2 terms wind down, President Obama is reflecting on the past 8 years in the White House. Speaking with Fox Network anchor Chris Wallace, he was asked what he considers his worst mistake as president.
Probably failing to plan for the day after what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya.
President's referring there to the capture of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Although President Obama says he thinks the intervention went as well as it could have, he views Libya today as a mess.
Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State at the time and responsible for overseeing the situation in Libya. Her mismanagement became a major talking point of the 2016 U.S. presidential election when she lost to Trump. What a lot of people do not realize is the reason Libya was important was because of oil. Libya is a member of OPEC and was the 16th largest oil producer in the world in 2021. So for Libya to fall into civil war and stop producing oil was a major shock to the oil market. The Obama administration released oil from the U.S. strategic oil reserves to help fight the increase in gas prices. This is somewhat similar to the situation today. The war between Russia and Ukraine has disrupted oil supply chains around the world. The strategic oil reserves were used under Obama's administration, and so Biden wants to do the same thing that Obama did. Now, there is an argument that this is not the proper use of the U.S. strategic oil reserves. There are other alternatives that would also reduce the price of oil, including lowering red tape on setting up new refineries, allowing more drilling on U.S. soil, or completing the Keystone XL pipeline. Draining the U.S. strategic oil reserves was not the only option, but it was the one Biden decided to use. The Biden administration claims they're doing everything they can do to reduce oil prices, but that is not true. If you talk to any oil executives, they will disagree with that statement. So at this point, we have had 2 subsequent Democrat administrations who have drained U.S. strategic oil reserves in response to global events. This is a difference in philosophy between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats believe in reducing America's reliance on fossil fuels. Their solution to high gas prices is to get rid of the U.S. strategic oil reserves. Republicans' philosophy on reducing gas prices is to make America energy independent by tapping into oil sources that are on U.S. soil. Then, it would not be necessary to release the oil reserves. Now, you can agree or disagree with either of these approaches, but under any philosophy, what happened at the auction with China was wrong. This brings us to the auction. The U.S. sold the oil from the U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve to the highest bidder. One of those bidders was the government of China. China walked away with almost 1 million barrels of oil. Some liberal news sources, including so-called fact-check websites, are already creating excuses for the Biden administration. They claim the U.S. had to sell oil to China. The U.S. is required by law to sell to the highest bidder. And if our adversary is the highest bidder, we have to give them our oil. There is nothing we can do. Here's what the law says. 42 U.S. Code 6241E1. The Secretary shall sell petroleum products withdrawn from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at public sale to the highest qualified bidder. So the argument for the Biden administration is they were blindly following normal procedures and they had to do it this way. I am here to tell you, do not fall for this argument because it is false. By law, the U.S. only has to sell to qualified bidders. Not just anyone can walk off the street and bid. The Department of Energy has a list you have to be pre-approved for to be able to bid. On top of that, if the results of the auction are somehow giving bizarre results or are not going to accomplish the goals of the release, they can just stop the auction. For instance, if U.S. enemies are buying all the oil, the U.S. could just say, that's not supposed to happen. They can stop the auction at any time. They're not forced to give our oil to China. This is an important point. There was an intentional decision here. I want you to imagine this. The staff from the Department of Energy were sitting around a conference table, and they were reviewing the list of winning bids from the auction. Now, these people are all experts in the oil industry. They know everything I have talked about in this video. They know about oil markets. They know this is an important situation that does not happen very often. They know that China has been increasing their oil reserves. They know that the company Unipec is owned by the Chinese government. They know that China is our adversary. They knew that giving this oil to China was not going to accomplish the goal of the release, which was to reduce gas prices. So why would they go through with this auction? They went through with it knowing it was wrong. What they should have done was stop the auction, take the Chinese government off the list of bidders, and run the auction again. I'm going to tell you why they did it. They sold the oil to China because there is a policy in the Biden administration on being soft on China, and the American people are getting hurt. Why won't Biden explain what happened? Why is the mainstream media letting him get away with this? Now let's talk about Trump. The liberal media counters any criticism of Biden by bringing up the argument that Trump did the same thing. Let us look at what Trump did. After Trump left office, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, received $2 billion into his private equity firm from Saudi Arabia. The money was personally approved by the controversial Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman has a long list of human rights violations, including being accused of the assassination of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. So the accusation against Trump is that he is also compromised by foreign governments. Jared Kushner was a senior policy advisor to the president and played a crucial role in talks during the Middle East peace process. For him to receive investment in his businesses only 6 months after working in the White House suggests the money could have been a bribe after the fact for decisions he made to influence U.S. policy. Typically, you would want former White House staff to wait a longer time, for instance, a 2-year period, before taking money from foreign governments. This is very concerning. If Trump ever returns to public office, Jared Kushner should not be allowed to work in the White House. However, we must be honest that these two situations are not the same. Jared Kushner took the money 6 months after Trump left office. That is not the same as Biden making China-friendly decisions while he is in office. In addition, Trump's peace plan for Israel was not favorable to Saudi Arabia. I see no evidence of bribery or collusion with Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm not here to promote Trump. I just feel that this oil deal with China is so important that we need to be clear about the facts. And I will tell you guys right now, I will continue to watch out in case Trump tries to get away with anything. Saudi Arabia is not our best friend either. If Trump ever holds public office again, everyone will be watching like a hawk to make sure he does not give any breaks to Saudi Arabia. Let us do the same thing with Biden and China. In summary, I'm going to make this very simple. If you are suffering in America today, it is because we are a global economy and you are competing against forced labor in China. If your wages are too low, it is because China can pay their workforce practically nothing and they have no rights. If you complain against the Chinese government, you get disappeared. That is who you are competing against. And rather than help the American people, politicians are doing nothing. Nothing is being done because there is a lot of wealthy people in the US who are getting paid by the Chinese government and they do not want to speak out. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about the Biden administration selling US oil reserves to China? Let me know in your comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Zach from Wolves in Finance. Let's go out and make some money.